So, how do we deal with bad behaviour? I think it's a really important issue to think about and talk about because bad behaviour can make the difference between a really good class and a really poor class. Bad behaviour can be really disruptive and also dissuade other kids who might usually want to come or usually enjoy the session from not coming or not enjoying the session. First thing to think about is how we define bad behaviour. So, what actually is it? I think I would put bad behaviour into two different categories. So the first one is the most pressing behaviours, the ones that need to be dealt with really soon so that they don't disrupt the rest of the class and other people or put other people in danger. In this category, I would put things like being violent, damaging equipment, not following instructions consistently, and things like hateful remarks. So being nasty to other kids or the students or the coach. I'd say there's then less pressing behaviours, the ones that might not actually ruin a session, but could be subtly making things a bit worse. For example, you could say asking needless questions, you could say laughing at other people's mistakes, and you could also maybe include a lack of effort, not putting any oomph into what they're doing. Now, everyone deals with bad behaviour in different ways, but I think one of the most vital things you can do at the start of a class, the start of a new term, or with new students is to make the rules clear to everyone and make sure they're heard and make sure they're understood. You have to know in your mind what's going to happen if so-and-so does this or so-and-so then does this. You have to make that clear in your head first, and then you need to explain that to your class. At the same time though, you don't want to put off new students and you don't want to create a scary atmosphere for, a new term if they've been away. So you want to try and slant the way you say this in a positive way. So you can say, these are the rules. For example, if I tell you to do something and you don't do it, then you'll sit out. But then you can phrase it positively that, guys, look, this shouldn't happen if we all have fun and all follow instructions. I want you to be safe. I don't want you to have to sit out. So let's make the most of this session. Let's try and improve, and then no one has to, be punished. If someone does misbehave, then the next thing I think is vital is to follow through with the rules. This is really important because if you let things slip, then your authority as a coach starts to dissolve and your respect as a figurehead for the session decreases. I've been in situations where kids have actually understood that they'll get away with certain behaviours, certain, messing about because they think that I won't follow through with what I've said, with my rules. And yeah, this is dangerous. If this carries on lesson after lesson, the kids build this sort of awareness that they can get away with doing this or doing that and nothing really as bad is going to happen to them. So you have to make it absolutely clear that if something's not on, then this is what's going to happen. I think this goes for assistant coaches as well. Just because they're an assistant coach doesn't mean they shouldn't be respected, doesn't mean they have some authority over the kids. They are running the session as well as you. So they should be able to dish out the same rules and the same punishments as the senior coach. I think that should be standard. I think it is a good idea if kids are sat out to make sure that they are talked to in person, in private, one-to-one. That could be the role of the assistant coach. Whilst you're taking the rest of the group, the assistant coach can go over, have a talk to them, see what's wrong, and just to make sure that they're not just sat there doing nothing and there's no, development there. If it goes further, if kids are continually misbehaving and their parents need to be informed or talked to or emailed, then you have to go through with that as well. And maybe that's something that the senior coach can implement more than the assistant coach. If I've said, look, I'm going to have to talk to your parents if you carry on doing this, then I have to follow through with that. And I have to do that in a way that hopefully will completely stop them from that behaviour because they've then got the pressure of their parents on the other side. I think a crucial aspect of bad behaviour that is kind of overlooked is understanding the student. You have to really think, why are they behaving like that? And there could be a number of different reasons. A really common one is that they're just not enjoying themselves. They're not having fun. They're not doing something that interests them. And I think, as Flynn commented on a previous video, it's really important to then understand that and elevate their emotional state. If they've sat out and you need to talk to them and you're asking them about their motivations, then you need to ask them, okay, so what do you want to learn? If we did this, would that make you want to join in more? Do you think you'd enjoy the session more? And then if they then behave better, then you can start to reward them by implementing those things that they want to do. That could really be the difference between them just messing about because they're not having fun or being miserable, and them having a good time and actually behaving much better. It could be something at home, and obviously if you think there's a real concern, if the kid is, if you think there's a certain problem that's going on with them outside of class, then that could be something that you need to talk to your welfare officer about or support service. Kids go through a lot during their life, and if there's something that's happened during that day or during the week, then that could well affect how they feel within the session. As a coach, you can't pry on exactly what it is, but if they're willing to talk about certain things that are affecting them or making them feel worse, then you can try and be that person who can understand and try and make things a bit easier for them. Of course, as well, if that's the case, then you should definitely follow this up with parents. So it could be talking to them at the end of the session, just one-to-one, or it could be emailing them after the session or calling them and just talking about the issue so that it can be solved and that they can then hopefully behave better in future lessons. One that I've found is really difficult to kind of figure out is peer pressure. I've got a group of lads who are all kind of 12 to 14, so they get into that age where they're sort of vying against, they're sort of competing against each other, vying for approval, all that sort of thing, and they're a bit boisterous. And individually, they're all quite well behaved, but put them together in a little group, then they will stick in that group and they will mess about, and they make things worse for themselves and they make things worse for the rest of the students actually. So it's something that I've been thinking about quite a lot, and I think maybe you don't want to take away the fun that they're having, coming to this class together, and maybe that's the only time they see each other. They could be friends just through that class, and you don't want to take that away from them by saying you can't do this with him, or you can't have a bit of fun together and be a bit boisterous. And but if it's ruining the session or ruin it for others, you need to think about how you can change that. And you could implement the warning that, guys, if you're continually messing about and disrupting the rest of the students, then I'm going to have to split you up. I'm going to put you in different groups, and until you can then behave better, then I can keep you together. If you want to stay together, behave well, and I'll let you stay together. Overall, dealing with bad behaviour is not black and white, as I said at the start. People have tried and tried and tried to find the best methods of ensuring there's good behaviour in class, and it's so difficult. It's really, really difficult, and there's so many ways you can think about it. And I'm no expert at all. I'm continuously trying to experiment with different methods and try and figure out what works best. And this could be great for one group, and I think I've figured it out, and then I've got another group of new kids and it doesn't work. I have to go back to the drawing board. I think you've got to be careful with just dealing out punishments because they're the traditional ones. I think, things like sitting people out, while it might work for some, it might not work for others. And I think just because it's traditional, you shouldn't carry on with it. If you think it's not working, then you need to think of different methods. Do some research, have a look and see what other teachers from different disciplines, other coaches, how they use punishment and how you can make it more beneficial to the student and to the class and to yourself. I think as well there is the issue of how harsh the punishment is. If you're a really, really strict coach and you're dealing out vicious punishments and are very kind of cold with the way you approach behaviour, then it might work and you might get a quiet group of kids who respect you and carry out the session. But at what cost? I mean, you might you might make them nervous for the session. You might make them kind of dread the session. You might make them not really see you as a warm figure to talk to if something's wrong. And that can be a real barrier that you've got to be careful of. So I'd advise not being crazily harsh on kids especially. I just don't think it works. Maybe when people get older and they expect a more vigorous approach, you can see that in martial arts teaching. It's a harsh approach, and that's because there's a lot at stake. Maybe that can work for older people, but with kids you have to be careful not to form this barrier between you and for them to kind of resent you. On the other hand, if you do make your punishments too easy or too casual, or you don't dish them out properly and to the T, then it can make kids get disruptive and let them get away with things that they shouldn't be getting away with. And this can cause problems with the whole class. If you're continually being too easy on kids, then they will understand it, they will sense it. It's like when one of your teachers goes away and you get a temp, well I can't remember that's the American word, but a temporary teacher, substitute teacher, that's it. If you get a substitute teacher, the kids, if they're not laying out the law and if they're not making themselves clear on how you should behave, who didn't take advantage of that? We understand it as kids. You'd understand if you can get away with stuff. So that is a real issue as well, and I think that could be more of a long-term issue, because if it permeates through the classes over and over again, you lose respect, you lose your sense of authority, and ultimately the kids might not learn from you as best they can, and you lose the ones that do want to learn. You lose the ones that think, oh well, he's mucking about all the time, so do you know what, I don't fancy this anymore, I want to go somewhere else. Personally, I use the approach that I will sit someone out if they do something that I don't want them to do and I've asked them not to do it. I'll sit them out and I'll explain to them, we'll have a talk about it. If it happens again, I'll call up the parent and ask them to come and pick up the student. And it doesn't go down well, but I think in a way it does work. And maybe I'm more on the harsh side of things, but I think especially with parkour, we need to make sure that they're in a safe environment. And there is, big risks in parkour. Parkour is really dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, and bad things can happen if people aren't concentrating just for a second. So I think that I would lean towards being more harsh. If in the next session things happen again, I would call the parents again and ask them to take them home. But then I would say, I'd like you to miss the next session, please. I don't want you to come back to the next session. You're free to come back after that, but I don't want you to come back to the next session. And that should be a real incentive. They'll probably get a telling off at home, they'll feel bad about it, and hopefully have a talk with their parents about why this has happened, and hopefully understand they need to take responsibility for their behaviour. And when they come back, then they won't want that to happen again. Lastly, my last resort is, if this becomes, a trend that they're constantly misbehaving, then I will say I'll have warned them that I'll have to cancel you from the class. I'll have to remove you from the register. I can't deal with you behaving like this anymore. It can't happen. We can't work with it. And you can say that as a coach. You have the authority. It's not anything's okay, just because it's after school. They're going there to learn, and you should be there to teach them. And if it's really, really bad, then they've got to go. And maybe they could come back next term, or maybe they could apply a year later or something like that. But in that situation, they have to go. And I think that's just the way it is, unfortunately. So what do you think, guys? What do you think are the best methods for dealing with bad behaviour in class? And what have you found works and what have you found that doesn't work? And do you agree with what I say, or do you think it's stupid? Because I'm genuinely interested, because I've had to deal with bad behaviour for a number of years now, and I don't think I'm not there yet. I'm still trying to figure out what's best, and I find it difficult. I think my personality type kind of leans towards being more lenient, so I feel like I'm I've had to kind of reinforce a kind of more assertive approach. And I think that's kind of what's working for me right now. But I'm very, very open to ideas. So if you have anything useful to say, please comment down below. That'd be great. I'd really love to hear that. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And, you know, if you want to hear more of these talks, go and click on subscribe and it will update you with more videos, different coaching topics, different interviews. I've got a few things lined up. So yeah, thank you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.